close your eyes and listen to the silence of the room around you, because within that quiet space lies the foundational lie that has governed every decision you have ever made. You have spent years operating under the subconscious delusion that your life is a movie where a third-act hero is currently rushing toward you to solve the problems you are too exhausted to face. This psychological safety net is a ghost in the machine of your mind, and it whispers that eventually a mentor will appear, or a lover will heal you, or a sudden stroke of luck will rewrite your bank account. It is a comforting lullaby that keeps you sedated in a state of perpetual waiting while the clock on the wall aggressively strips away the only currency you actually possess, which is time. You are not waiting for the right moment, you are waiting for a rescue that was never commissioned by the universe. This belief is a survival mechanism designed to protect your ego from the crushing weight of total responsibility, but it has become a cage that prevents you from ever truly tasting freedom. The harsh reality is that the cavalry is not over the hill, and the universe is entirely indifferent to your struggle unless you decide to move. Every day you wake up expecting a shift in the wind, but you are the one holding the sails, and you have left them tied to the dock out of fear. This is the moment where the illusion must shatter, because until you accept the terrifying isolation of your own existence, you will remain a passenger in a vehicle that is slowly rolling toward a cliff of regret. The rescue fantasy is the ultimate anesthetic for a life half-lived, and it is time to wake up to the cold truth that you are the only one standing in the gap between who you are and who you must become. The architecture of your current comfort zone is not built from bricks of success, but from the rotting timber of false hope and passive thinking, which you have mistakenly labeled as patience. You tell yourself that you are being strategic or that you are waiting for the stars to align, when in reality, you are simply terrified of the silence that follows a failed attempt. Passive thinking is a sophisticated form of cowardice that disguises itself as contemplation, allowing you to feel productive while you are actually standing perfectly still. You have become an architect of excuses, building elaborate justifications for why today is not the day to change, while the foundation of your potential slowly erodes beneath you. This comfort is a slow poison because it feels warm and safe, like a bath that is gradually reaching a boil while you stay submerged in the steam. You have conditioned your brain to find relief in the idea of tomorrow, which is a magical land where all your discipline and courage supposedly reside, but that land does not exist on any map. Every time you delay an action because you do not feel ready, you are reinforcing the neural pathway that says you are incapable of handling reality. The comfort zone is where dreams go to be taxidermied and displayed as reminders of what could have been if only you had possessed the nerve to be uncomfortable. You are currently worshiping at the altar of safety, but safety is a myth sold to those who are too afraid to bleed for what they want. If you continue to wait for the feeling of certainty before you move, you will spend the rest of your life paralyzed in a room full of ghosts. Breaking this cycle requires a violent mental departure from the idea that struggle is an error in the system rather than the system itself designed to forge you. Think back to the earliest seeds of your dependency, which were planted long before you had the cognitive tools to question the narrative being fed to your young mind. From the moment you were born, you were taught to look upward for permission and outward for validation, starting with parents who solved your hunger and teachers who graded your worth. This childhood conditioning created a deep-seated belief that there is always an authority figure or a structural safety net waiting to catch you if you fall too far into the abyss. You were programmed to believe that if you followed the rules and played your part, the world would eventually reward your compliance with a sense of stability and peace. This social engineering is designed to create functional cogs in a machine, not self-reliant masters of their own destiny. And you have carried these playground expectations into your adult life. You are still looking for a gold star or a pat on the head while you wait for someone to tell you that it is finally your turn to lead. The tragedy of this programming is that it makes you allergic to the isolation required for true greatness because you have been taught that being alone is a sign of failure. You seek consensus before you seek action because you are afraid of the weight of a decision that is purely your own. This dependency is a phantom limb that you keep trying to use only to realize it cannot support your weight when the world gets heavy. Your childhood was a training ground for a world that no longer exists, and the safety nets you were promised have been cut by the reality of a competitive and unforgiving landscape. To grow up is to realize that the adults you once looked to for answers were just as lost as you are now, and that no one actually has a map for your specific journey. We live in a culture that fetishizes motivation as if it were a spiritual visitation that descends upon the chosen few rather than a fleeting chemical byproduct of action. You have been lied to by a multi-billion-dollar industry that suggests you need to feel inspired before you can begin the grueling work of transforming your life. This reliance on emotional states is a form of self-sabotage because emotions are the most unstable foundation upon which to build a legacy or a career. By waiting for the perfect mood, you have handed the keys of your future to the whims of your biology and the fluctuations of your morning coffee. True control is not found in the presence of motivation, but in the absolute commitment to discipline when every fiber of your being is screaming for you to remain in bed. You are unknowingly waiting for a surge of energy that will never come because energy is generated through movement, not through contemplation or visual boards. The elite performers of the world do not feel like working any more than you do, but they have severed the link between their feelings and their functions. When you say you are not ready, what you are really saying is that you are unwilling to experience the friction of growth without a guarantee of success. This friction is the only thing that sharpens the blade of your character, but you avoid it in favor of a smooth and dull existence. You have been socially programmed to believe that struggle is a sign that you are doing something wrong, when in fact it is the primary indicator that you are finally doing something right. Stop looking for the spark and start striking the flint yourself, because the fire you are waiting for is trapped inside the very stones you are too afraid to move. Control is not a gift that is granted by the universe. It is a territory that must be seized through the relentless application of will. The most dangerous lie you believe is that there will be a more convenient time to start the difficult work of reclaiming your autonomy and your power. You treat the future as a dumping ground for the responsibilities you are too weak to carry today, assuming that some future version of yourself will be stronger. This is a profound betrayal of your potential because the future version of you is being shaped by the cowardice you are practicing in this very moment. There is no magical threshold of maturity or wealth that will suddenly make the hard choices easy or the risks feel less like a gamble. The clock is a predator that does not care about your intentions or your potential, and it is currently devouring the years you thought were guaranteed. Every hour you spend waiting for a sign is an hour you have effectively deleted from the record of your existence with nothing to show for it, but a dull sense of anxiety. This anxiety is your soul screaming at you that you are out of alignment with your purpose, but you choose to drown it out with digital noise and temporary pleasures. You have become a professional at preparing to begin, but you are an amateur at actually executing the plan, because execution requires the death of your excuses. The perfect timing you seek is a mirage that recedes as you approach it, designed to keep you walking in circles until you are too tired to keep going. Real life happens in the messy and inconvenient gaps between your plans, and it is there that your character is either forged or forgotten. If you do not take control of the narrative now, the world will gladly write a tragedy for you and cast you as the victim who never saw it coming. The realization that you are already late is the only alarm clock that will actually wake you up from this fever dream of procrastination. You must look into the mirror and confront the fact that you have become a stranger to yourself by prioritizing the expectations of a society that does not know your name. You have spent your energy trying to fit into boxes that were built to contain you rather than expand you, and you have mistaken this containment for a sense of belonging. The social programming that creates dependency is a subtle, invisible tether that pulls you back toward the middle whenever you show a spark of individual fire. You are afraid of the judgment of people who are just as terrified and stuck as you are, and you have allowed their opinions to become the boundaries of your world. This is a form of mental slavery where you are both the prisoner and the guard, watching yourself through the eyes of a judgmental public that is not even paying attention. Your need for support is often just a masked need for permission, but you will never get permission to be extraordinary from people who are content with being average. The herd does not want you to succeed because your success would be a mirror reflecting their own lack of initiative and courage. This is why you feel a sense of guilt when you think about leaving everyone behind to pursue a vision that only you can see. You are being held hostage by a collective agreement to remain small, and you have signed a contract with every silent nod and every compromised dream. To break free, you must be willing to be the villain in someone else's story so that you can finally be the hero in your own. The awareness of this conditioning is the first step in dismantling it, but awareness without action is just a more sophisticated form of suffering. You must be willing to stand alone in the cold until you are strong enough to build your own fire and stop begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for you. The psychological disruption you are feeling right now is the sound of the old walls cracking under the weight of a truth you have tried to ignore for a decade. It is the realization that the people you thought would save you are actually looking for someone to save them, and the cycle of dependency ends only when you stop participating. This awareness is painful because it strips away the warmth of the lie and leaves you standing naked in the reality of your own choices. You have been living a life that is a reaction to external pressures rather than an expression of internal will, and the resulting hollowness is what keeps you awake at night. The discomfort you feel is not a malfunction, it is a signal that your current way of being is no longer sustainable for the person you are becoming. You have been trying to fill a bottomless pit of insecurity with the crumbs of other people's approval, but that hunger will never be satisfied by anyone but yourself. The lie that someone is coming to save you was the only thing keeping you from the terrifying realization that you are completely and utterly responsible for everything you have and everything you lack. This responsibility is a heavy burden, but it is also the only source of genuine power available to a human being in this chaotic world. When you accept that no one is coming, you are finally forced to use your own legs and your own mind to navigate the terrain. The fear you feel is the fear of a bird that has lived in a cage so long it has forgotten that it has wings, but the cage door is now wide open. You can either stay inside and wait for a master who will never return, or you can step out into the vast and dangerous sky of your own potential. This is the crossing point where the passenger becomes the pilot and the dream becomes a mission that requires your total and undivided attention. As this chapter concludes, you must sit with the weight of your own agency and understand that from this moment forward you can no longer claim ignorance as a defense. The mask has been removed, and the silent partner you were waiting for has been revealed as a figment of your imagination designed to keep you from the labor of growth. You are now exposed to the reality that your life is the sum of your own actions and the result of the risks you were too afraid to take. This exposure is not meant to crush you, but to liberate you from the exhausting effort of maintaining a facade that was never going to support your weight. You are the architect, the builder, and the occupant of your own destiny, and the tools are already in your hands, even if they feel heavy and unfamiliar. The awakening you are experiencing is the beginning of a long and difficult road, but it is the only road that leads to a destination worth reaching. Do not look back at the safety of the lie, because that bridge has already burned behind you, leaving only the path that moves forward into the unknown. The slightly dark reflection you see in the glass is not a monster, but the face of a person who is finally ready to stop waiting and start becoming. You have been a spectator at your own funeral for too long, watching the years pass by while you waited for a sign that you were allowed to live. This is your sign, and it is written in the silence of your own breath and the beating of your own heart, which is the only engine that will ever drive you toward greatness. The lie is dead, and in its place stands the cold, hard, and beautiful truth that you are the only savior you will ever have. Now take the first step into the light of that terrifying truth, and do not stop until you have built a life that no longer needs an escape. Your transformation is not a possibility, it is a requirement, and the time for negotiation has ended because you are finally the one in command. You are currently standing on a stage in a crowded theater, performing for an audience that has already left the building and is now focused entirely on their own reflections in the lobby mirrors. The most profound and brutal reality of your existence is that the spotlight you think is following your every move is actually just a flicker in your own mind. You have spent decades polishing your failures and hiding your scars because you are convinced that the world is keeping a detailed ledger of your progress and your mistakes. This is the grand delusion of the ego, which convinces you that you are the protagonist of a global narrative, when in reality you are a background extra in everyone else's movie. People are not lying awake at night thinking about your awkward conversation or your failed business venture because they are too busy suffocating under the weight of their own insecurities. Your fear of judgment is based on a lie that suggests others have the spare bandwidth to actually care about your trajectory or your shortcomings. They do not have that bandwidth because the human condition is inherently selfish and preoccupied with its own survival and social standing. When you realize that no one is watching you, the initial chill of abandonment is quickly replaced by the realization that the bars of your prison were never actually locked. You have been performing for ghosts and letting their imagined opinions dictate the boundaries of your potential, while the real world remains completely indifferent to your hesitation. This indifference is not a tragedy, but the greatest gift you will ever receive, because it grants you the total permission to fail without a witness. The silence of the world is not a sign of neglect, but the sound of your absolute freedom to begin again without the burden of having to explain yourself to an audience that was never truly there. The weight of the gaze you feel upon your back is nothing more than the phantom pressure of your own self-criticism projected onto the faces of strangers who do not know your middle name. Most people move through their lives in a state of perpetual performance, art, trying to appease a jury that has already been dismissed for the day. You have likely passed up a dozen opportunities to speak or to lead or to create because you were terrified of the mockery that you assumed would follow your inevitable stumble. Think of the art you never started and the phone calls you never made, and the clothes you never wore simply because you were afraid of a glance from someone you will never see again. This social conditioning has turned you into a timid version of your true self, a shadow that is constantly checking the perimeter for a judgment that is actually occurring within your own skull. We are a species of mimics who have been trained to value the perception of the group over the reality of the individual, and this has created a society of paralyzed performers. You are waiting for a round of applause that will never come, and you are avoiding a booing section that does not exist in the physical world. The fear of being seen as a fool has made you a ghost, and you are wasting the finite energy of your life trying to manage an image that nobody is actually looking at. Every time you hold back a part of yourself out of fear, you are sacrificing your future to the altar of an imaginary critic who has no power to stop you. The liberation begins the moment you accept that you are invisible to the masses, because only in that invisibility can you finally afford to be honest with yourself. You are the only one tracking your progress, and you are the only one who will have to live with the consequences of your inaction when the credits finally roll. Consider the amount of human potential that has been buried in the graveyard of perceived judgment, where brilliant ideas go to die because their creators were afraid of a smirk. There are entire businesses that were never launched, and novels that were never finished, and lives that were never lived, because the people behind them were waiting for a validation that never arrived. You are currently part of this silent tragedy every time you choose the safe path to avoid the risk of looking desperate or foolish in the eyes of your peers. The people you are trying to impress are themselves trapped in a similar cycle of fear, looking at you and wondering what you think of them while you are doing the same. It is a hall of mirrors where everyone is so focused on their own reflection that nobody is actually seeing anyone else clearly. This creates a collective paralysis where everyone stays in line out of a fear of being the only one who steps out, even though the line leads nowhere. You have been taught that social standing is a form of survival, but in the modern age it has become a form of slow death by conformity. The fear of judgment is a vestigial organ from our tribal past that no longer serves a purpose in a world where you can disappear into a crowd of millions. You are treating a temporary embarrassment as if it were a permanent execution, but the world moves on from your failures faster than you can even process them. A scandal that feels like the end of your world is merely a 3-second distraction for someone else scrolling through a feed before they return to their own problems. You are not a landmark on the map of human consciousness, you are a momentary blip, and once you accept your insignificance, you can finally begin to act with the reckless abandon of a person who has nothing left to lose. Freedom is not the absence of people, but the absence of the belief that their opinions carry any weight in the construction of your internal kingdom. When you stop looking for the nod of approval, you gain the ability to move with a speed and a precision that was previously impossible under the weight of external expectations. Realize that most of the people you are afraid of are currently drowning in their own regrets, and they do not have the moral authority to judge your attempt at a better life. The fear of being judged is actually a form of arrogance because it assumes that you are important enough to occupy a significant space in the minds of others. You are not that important, and that realization should be the most empowering thought you have ever had, because it means the shackles are gone. You can fail 1,000 times in the dark, and the only person who will know the full extent of the struggle is the person you see in the mirror every morning. The tracking of your progress is a private matter between your current self and your potential self, and any external commentary is just background noise in a room you are passing through. Wasted potential is the only true sin you can commit, but it is a sin that is encouraged by a society that wants you to remain predictable and manageable. When you stop being manageable, you become dangerous to the status quo because you are no longer susceptible to the primary tool of social control, which is shame. Shame requires an audience to function, and when you realize the audience is made of paper cutouts, the shame evaporates like mist in the morning sun. You are the sole judge and jury of your own existence, and you have been far too harsh on your mistakes and far too lenient on your cowardice. It is time to stop looking for a witness to your growth and start growing for the sake of the harvest, because you are the only one who will ever truly taste the fruit. The discomfort you feel right now is the breaking of a psychological fever that has kept you shivering in the corners of your own life for far too long. You have been conditioned to believe that you are being watched by a benevolent or a malevolent force, but the truth is far colder and much more beautiful. You are alone in the cockpit. There is no divine scoreboard, and there is no social registry that records every time you stuttered or fell behind the pack in the race for status. This isolation is the foundation of true power because it means you are no longer a slave to the fickle winds of public opinion or the shallow praise of your community. Imagine the things you could accomplish if you truly believed that you were invisible for the next year and that no one would ever find out about your efforts. You would likely work harder and take more risks and speak more clearly because the threat of social death would be removed from the equation. The irony is that you already have this invisibility, but you are refusing to use it because you are addicted to the feeling of being relevant in the eyes of others. Relevancy is a trap that keeps you tethered to the average because the average is the only thing the masses can easily digest and categorize. To be exceptional is to be misunderstood, and to be misunderstood is to be judged, but once you stop caring about the judgment, the misunderstanding becomes your greatest advantage. You are currently a prisoner of a digital and social panopticon where the guards are all in your head, and the doors are wide open for anyone brave enough to walk. Your progress is not a public utility, it is a private investment, and the dividends will only be paid to the person who had the courage to work when no one was looking. Stop performing for a ghost and start building for a king, because the only person who needs to be impressed by your life is the one who has to live it. The illusion of a watchful world creates a layer of friction on every action you take, making the simplest tasks feel like they are being performed on a high wire in front of a stadium. This friction is what causes the hesitation that eventually turns into a lifestyle of missed opportunities and quiet desperation. You tell yourself you are being cautious, but you are actually being theatrical, acting out a version of yourself that you think is acceptable to the hypothetical observer. This is a massive waste of cognitive resources that could be used to solve problems or create wealth or build strength, but instead they are spent on image management. You are a CEO who is more worried about the office decor than the actual production of the factory, and as a result, the business of your life is going bankrupt. The brutal truth is that even if you do succeed, people will only look at you long enough to see if they can get something from you before they return to their own appetites. Your successes are as fleeting in their minds as your failures, so why are you sacrificing your happiness to appease such a temporary and shallow audience? The examples of wasted potential are all around you in the faces of the people who stayed in the hometown they hated and the jobs they despised because they were afraid of what the neighbors would say. They traded their fire for a sense of belonging among people who do not even like them, and you are currently on the path to doing the same. Breaking this cycle requires a cold and honest look at the people you are afraid of and realizing they are not gods, they are just scared animals trying to find a place to hide. When you stop hiding, you become the only real thing in a world of masks, and that authenticity will feel like a weapon in your hands. The liberation you seek is found in the dark corners where no one bothers to look, because that is where the real work of transformation takes place. You do not need to announce your intentions to the world or post your milestones for a handful of digital likes that provide a hollow dopamine hit. True progress is silent, and it is often very ugly, and it requires a level of focus that is impossible to maintain if you are constantly checking to see if people are noticing. Think of the greatest shifts in your character, and you will realize they happened when you were backed into a corner with no one to watch you but your own conscience. The world is a distraction from the internal forge where your destiny is being hammered into shape, and the more you look outward, the more you lose the heat required for the change. You have been living your life in a state of high-definition surveillance, but you are the one who installed the cameras, and you are the one who is monitoring the feed. Turn the cameras off and let the screens go dark so that you can finally hear the sound of your own ambition without the static of social feedback. There is a profound peace in being forgotten by the world because it allows you to experiment and fail and refine your craft without the pressure of a deadline or a review. You are not a commodity to be consumed by the public. You are a force of nature that is currently being suppressed by the desire to be liked. The moment you accept that no one is tracking your progress is the moment you can finally start moving at your own pace, which is likely much faster than the one you have been forced to maintain. Discomfort is the price of admission to a life that is truly yours, and you must be willing to pay it every single day until the opinions of others feel like the buzzing of distant insects. As this chapter draws to a close, you should feel a cold wind blowing through the theater of your mind as the last of the imaginary audience members disappears into the night. You are standing alone on the stage, and the house lights have been turned off, leaving you with nothing but the reality of your own presence and the work that lies ahead. The brutal honesty of this realization is your new starting point, and it is the only ground solid enough to support the weight of a real human life. No one is coming to save you, and no one is watching you, and no one is going to give you a medal for simply existing or for following the rules. This is not a reason to despair, but a reason to rejoice, because the rules were written by people who wanted you to stay in your seat and watch the play. You are now free to walk off the stage and out into the world where you can build something that actually matters regardless of whether it is ever seen or celebrated. The fear of judgment has been revealed as a ghost, and the pressure to perform has been exposed as a self-imposed prison that you are now walking away from. Carry this cold liberation with you into the next hour and the next day, and use it to cut through the hesitation that has paralyzed you for years. Your life is a private performance for a crowd of one, and the only review that matters is the one you give yourself when you look back from the finish line. Stop waiting for the world to notice you and start noticing the world and all the ways you can bend it to your will now that you are no longer afraid of its gaze. The freedom you have found is a dangerous thing because it leaves you with no one to blame for your failures but yourself, and that is exactly where your power begins. You are invisible and you are alone, and you are finally ready to become the person you were meant to be before the world told you who to play. There is a specific kind of silence that descends upon a person when the last excuse finally withers and dies in the heat of a cold and uncompromising reality. It is the moment you stop looking at your parents, your partner, or your employer as the source of your misery and start looking at the hands that have been steering your life. This is the day you realize that the narrative of being a victim of circumstance was just a sophisticated shield you used to protect yourself from the terrifying light of your own potential. The pain of this realization is sharp, and it feels like a physical weight pressing against your chest, because it forces you to acknowledge every year you wasted waiting for a permission slip that was never going to come. You have spent your entire existence building a complex legal case against the world, explaining why you are stuck and why you are broke and why you are unloved, but the judge has left the courtroom and you are arguing with an empty bench. This internal shift is a violent psychological amputation where you cut away the parts of your identity that were fused to the idea of being rescued by some external force. It is the most lonely feeling in the world to realize that the cavalry isn't coming because you are the cavalry and you have been sitting in the dirt waiting for yourself to arrive. Yet in the center of that loneliness, there is a spark of something ancient and indestructible that begins to flicker because for the first time in your life, you are actually telling yourself the truth. You are standing at the edge of a great divide and the bridge behind you is engulfed in flames, leaving you with no choice but to face the vast and open territory of your own absolute responsibility. The identity crisis that follows this awakening is not a mental breakdown, but a controlled demolition of a version of you that was never meant to survive the demands of greatness. You will feel a deep sense of mourning for the person you used to be, the one who could blame the economy or a bad childhood for the stagnation of their soul, because that person was safe in their victimhood. Owning everything means accepting that even the things that were not your fault are still your responsibility to fix, and that is a bitter pill to swallow for an ego that thrives on being right. You must confront the reality that your current life is a perfect reflection of your standards and your boundaries and the things you have been willing to tolerate for the sake of comfort. The moment of truth arrives when you realize that every time you pointed a finger outward, you were actually bleeding out your power into the hands of someone who doesn't even know you exist. This realization triggers an emotional conflict that will make you want to scream at the sky because the weight of your future is now resting entirely on your own shoulders without a safety net in sight. You are stripped of the luxury of complaining because complaining is the language of the powerless, and you have just discovered that you are the architect of your own prison. The walls are not made of stone, but of the repeated decisions you made to stay small and the thousands of times you said tomorrow when you should have said now. This is the breaking point where the facade of your life shatters into a million pieces and you are left standing in the rubble with nothing but your will to rebuild something that can actually withstand the storm. As the excuses begin to evaporate, you will notice a terrifying increase in your self-awareness that makes it impossible to hide from the mirror of your own conscience anymore. You can no longer watch television or scroll through a feed without feeling the nagging pull of the work you are avoiding, because the anesthetic of denial has completely worn off. Every hour you spend in distraction now feels like a betrayal of the person you are becoming, and the physical sensation of guilt is actually the birth pains of a new and higher level of discipline. You begin to see the intricate patterns of your own self-sabotage and how you use the drama of others to avoid the boring and difficult labor of your own self-improvement. This clarity is exhausting because it demands a level of vigilance that you have never practiced, and it forces you to take inventory of the people you have allowed to drain your energy. You realize that you have been a volunteer in your own suffering, and that the door to your freedom was never locked from the outside. You were just too afraid to turn the handle. The power that unlocks in this moment is not a sudden burst of joy, but a steady and quiet resolve that says, I will not live like this for one more second regardless of the cost. You are finally becoming a person of consequence because you have decided that your word to yourself is more important than the opinions of the entire world combined. This is the transition from being a piece on the board to being the player who understands the game, and it requires you to be ruthless with the parts of yourself that still want to crawl back into the dark. The self-awareness is a flashlight that you are now shining into the darkest corners of your habits. And while the view is ugly, the ability to see is what will save your life. The shift toward full responsibility is often accompanied by a profound sense of anger, not at the world, but at the version of yourself that stayed asleep for so long while the clock was ticking. You look at the opportunities you let slip through your fingers and the relationships you allowed to wither because you were too busy waiting for a sign or a spark of motivation. This anger is a holy fire that you must learn to harness because it provides the initial fuel needed to launch yourself out of the gravitational pull of your old habits. You are finally understanding that no one is going to offer you a seat at the table. You must build your own table or starve in the shadows of someone else's success. The pain of the realization is actually the sound of your chains snapping, and while the skin underneath is raw, the air of freedom is starting to fill your lungs for the first time. You realize that being in charge of your life is not a burden, but the ultimate privilege because it means that you are no longer a leaf in the wind, but the wind itself. There is a deep and resonant power in the words "it is all on me," because they remove the static of external noise and leave you with a clear and direct line of action. You stop looking for a mentor to give you a map, and you start walking through the forest with the intention of carving your own trail through the underbrush. This is the moment you stop being a consumer of other people's courage and you start becoming the source of your own, which is the only form of bravery that actually matters. The identity you are forging now is one that is built on the bedrock of results rather than the shifting sands of intentions, and that makes you a dangerous force in a world full of dreamers. In this emotional crucible, you will find that your relationships begin to change because you are no longer seeking a rescuer or a co-conspirator in your excuses. You lose the desire to bond over shared grievances or to find comfort in the collective mediocrity of people who are also waiting for their lives to begin by magic. This isolation can be frightening, but it is the necessary pruning of the dead branches of your social circle so that you can grow into the space you were meant to occupy. You realize that most of the support you were seeking was actually just a request for people to validate your stagnation, and you no longer have the appetite for that kind of poison. The emotional intensity of this chapter of your life is a sign that you are finally engaged in the real work of transformation rather than the performance of change. You are learning to sit with the discomfort of your own company and to trust the voice that tells you that you are capable of handling whatever the universe throws at you. The shift is complete when you can look at your bank account, your body, and your career and say without a hint of irony that I created this, and I am the only one who can change it. This is not about self-blame, but about self-efficacy and the realization that the power to destroy is also the power to create a masterpiece from the ashes of your old life. You are no longer waiting for a turning point. You have become the turning point, and the momentum you are building is starting to shift the very ground beneath your feet. The crisis of identity is over because you have found a new name, and that name is responsibility, which is the only name that carries any weight in the real world. The disappearing of excuses is a gradual process that feels like a clearing of the fog, revealing a landscape that is both more beautiful and more demanding than you ever imagined. You find yourself catching the lies before they leave your mouth and stopping the thoughts of defeat before they can take root in your mind like weeds in a neglected garden. This level of self-control is the first true taste of mastery, and it tastes better than any comfort you ever found in the middle of a warm and familiar failure. You are beginning to understand that the pain of discipline is far lighter than the soul-crushing weight of regret that waits for you at the end of a life spent avoiding the mirror. The moment of truth has passed, and you are now living in the aftermath of that collision between who you were and who you must be to survive the coming years. Every decision you make is now weighted with the knowledge that there is no one to blame if it goes wrong and no one to thank, but yourself if it goes right. This total ownership creates a sense of presence that makes every second feel vital and every action feel like a brushstroke on a canvas that the world will one day see. You are no longer drifting through your days like a ghost in your own house, but walking through them like a king who has finally reclaimed his throne from the usurpers of fear and doubt. The transformation is deeply personal, and it cannot be shared with those who are still asleep, because they will only try to pull you back into the dream where everything is someone else's fault. You are moving at a different frequency now, and the noise of the old world is starting to fade into a distant hum that no longer has the power to distract you from your mission. Standing at this turning point, you realize that the power you have unlocked is the power of the path, which is the only thing that can lead you out of the labyrinth of your own making. You are no longer looking for a shortcut or a secret door, because you know that the only way out is through the center of the struggle, and you are finally ready for the climb. The realization that it is all on you is the most liberating thought a human can have, because it means the ceiling on your life has been removed, and you can go as high as your lungs will allow. You are the source of the light and the source of the heat and the source of the movement that will eventually change the landscape of your entire existence. The emotional, intense nature of this shift is the fuel that will keep you going when the initial excitement of the change wears off and the long middle of the work begins in earnest. You have traded the shallow peace of the slave for the dangerous and exhilarating freedom of the master, and there is no turning back from this level of clarity. The path ahead is steep, and it is covered in stones that will cut your feet, but they are your stones, and it is your path, and that is enough to keep you moving forward. You are no longer a spectator in the Colosseum watching others fight for their lives. You have stepped onto the sand, and you have picked up the sword, and you are ready to earn your place. The day you realize it is all on you is the day you finally stop dying and start living with a ferocity that will leave a mark on the world long after you are gone. As you breathe in the cold air of this new reality, let the weight of your responsibility settle into your bones like a suit of armor that is both heavy and protective at the same time. You are the only person who can save you, and you are the only person who can break you, and that is the most powerful position you will ever occupy in this universe. The transition is over, and the real work is about to begin, and you are doing it with your eyes wide open and your heart hardened into a diamond that can cut through any obstacle. Do not look for comfort in the coming days, because comfort is the enemy of the person you are trying to forge, and you have already had enough of it to last a lifetime. Look for the friction, look for the resistance, and look for the moments where you want to quit, because those are the moments where the old you finally dies for good. You are standing on the ruins of your excuses, and the view from here is spectacular, because you can finally see for miles in every direction without the fog of denial. The journey ahead is yours alone, but you are finally equipped with the only tool you ever really needed, which is the absolute and unwavering acceptance of your own power. No one is coming to save you, and that is the best news you have ever heard, because it means that no one can take your victory away from you when you finally reach the summit. This is your life, and it is entirely in your hands, and for the first time you are actually ready to hold it with the strength it deserves. The silence of the room is no longer empty. It is filled with the sound of your own potential, waiting for the next command from the person who is finally in charge. The velvet trap of your daily routine is currently acting as a slow-motion executioner of everything you were meant to achieve in this lifetime. Comfort is not a reward for your hard work. but a chemical bribe that your brain uses to keep you from the evolutionary stress required to actually evolve into a superior version of yourself. You are being seduced by the soft glow of your screens and the lukewarm satisfaction of a full stomach while your ambition is being quietly smothered in the background like an unwanted flame. Every time you choose the couch over the gym or the mindless scroll over the difficult book, you are casting a vote for your own irrelevance and signing a contract with mediocrity. This state of ease feels like safety, but it is actually a biological stagnant pond where your potential goes to rot and die without ever seeing the light of day. You have become a professional at avoiding the very friction that is designed to sharpen your character, and as a result you are becoming dull and brittle in a world that only respects the sharp. The warmth of your current life is the temperature of a decaying body, and the more you seek to avoid discomfort, the more you are practicing for the grave. You are currently worshiping at the altar of the easy path, but that path is a conveyor belt leading directly to a furnace of long-term regret, where you will eventually realize that you traded your greatness for a few hours of cheap entertainment. This is the moment where you must realize that the enemy is not a monster under the bed, but the plush pillows and the endless convenience that have made you too soft to fight for the life you claim to want. You are a biological junkie addicted to the cheap dopamine hits provided by a world that has figured out how to monetize your lack of self-control and your desire for instant gratification. Your brain is being hijacked by algorithms designed to keep you in a state of perpetual distraction so that you never have enough focus to realize how far you have fallen from your original goals. Dopamine was meant to be the reward for survival and achievement, but you have hacked the system, and now you get the prize without doing the work, which has rendered you emotionally and spiritually bankrupt. This constant flood of easy pleasure has raised your threshold for satisfaction to the point where real effort feels like a physical assault on your nervous system. You avoid the hard tasks not because they are impossible, but because you have lost the ability to tolerate the silence and the strain required to see them through to the end. Procrastination is not a time management problem. It is a character flaw rooted in your inability to regulate the temporary discomfort of starting something that matters. You tell yourself you will do it tomorrow, but tomorrow is just a convenient dumping ground for the responsibilities you are too weak to carry today. By avoiding the work, you are reinforcing a neural pathway of cowardice that makes it harder to act every single time you give in to the urge to delay. Your avoidance behavior is a slow suicide of the spirit, and every day you spend in this state of high stimulation and low effort is a day you are actively deleting from the record of your own success. You are currently drowning in a sea of sugar and digital noise, and you are calling it a lifestyle when it is actually a death sentence for your future. The most dangerous thing about comfort is that it feels remarkably similar to peace until the day the consequences of your inaction finally catch up to you in the form of a crisis you are unprepared to handle. You are currently living in a fragile bubble of safety that exists only because you haven't been tested by the reality of an unforgiving and competitive world. Choosing ease over growth is a strategy that works in the short term, but it leaves you vulnerable to the inevitable storms that will eventually tear through your life and find you lacking the muscle to survive. Think of the thousands of hours you have wasted on low-effort habits that provided nothing but a temporary escape from the pressure of your own expectations. While you were relaxing, the world was moving forward, and the gap between who you are and who you could have been has become a canyon that is growing wider with every passing hour of your sloth. You have traded the exhilaration of the climb for the safety of the base camp, and now you are wondering why you feel a deep and hollow sense of dissatisfaction in your gut. That feeling is your soul mourning the death of your ambition, and no amount of television or comfort food will ever be enough to fill that void. You are suffering from a slow-motion catastrophe of the self, and the only reason you aren't screaming is because the anesthetic of your distractions is still flowing through your veins. You must realize that the cost of your current comfort is being billed to your future self, and the interest rate on that debt is high enough to bankrupt your entire existence. The easy life you are living is a lie, and the longer you stay in it, the more you lose the capacity to ever leave it behind for the sake of something real. Regret is a predatory animal that waits until you are too old and too tired to fight back before it begins to consume you from the inside out with the memory of everything you failed to do. You are currently providing that predator with all the ammunition it needs by choosing the path of least resistance at every single crossroads you encounter in your daily life. The small decisions to skip the extra mile, or to take the shortcut, or to ignore the difficult conversation are all pebbles that will eventually become the mountain of remorse that collapses on your chest. Most people live their entire lives in a state of quiet desperation because they were too afraid of the temporary pain of growth to ever reach for the fruit of their labor. They choose the familiarity of their current misery over the uncertainty of a new beginning, and as a result they die with their music still inside them. You are on the exact same trajectory right now, and the only thing that can change the outcome is a violent and immediate rejection of everything that makes you feel safe and settled. Comfort has made you a spectator in a world that belongs to the aggressive and the persistent, and you are currently watching the highlights of other people's lives while yours remains unplayed. There is no nobility in your moderation, and there is no virtue in your desire to keep things as they are, because the universe is either expanding or contracting, and you are currently shrinking into nothingness. You must learn to hate your comfort zone with a passion that overrides your fear of the unknown, because that zone is the grave where your legacy is currently being buried. If you do not find a way to make yourself uncomfortable today, you will find yourself in a state of permanent agony tomorrow when you realize that you had the power to change and you simply refuse to use it. The architecture of mediocrity is built on the foundation of easy choices and the refusal to engage with the elements of life that require grit and sustained effort. You have become an expert at finding the path that requires the least amount of resistance, and you have mistaken this efficiency for intelligence when it is actually just a form of cowardice. Every successful person you admire has a high tolerance for pain and a low tolerance for excuses, while you have a high tolerance for excuses and a low tolerance for even the slightest inconvenience. You complain about the weather, the economy, and your luck, but you never complain about the fact that you spent the last 4 hours doing absolutely nothing of value for your future self. This disparity between your desire for greatness and your willingness to work for it is the source of all your internal conflict and your growing sense of self-loathing. You cannot have a premium life with a bargain bin work ethic, and you cannot expect the rewards of the champion while the architecture of mediocrity is built on the foundation of easy choices and the refusal to engage with the elements of life that require grit and sustained effort. You have become an expert at finding the path that requires the least amount of resistance, and you have mistaken this efficiency for intelligence when it is actually just a form of cowardice. Every successful person you admire has a high tolerance for pain and a low tolerance for excuses, while you have a high tolerance for excuses and a low tolerance for even the slightest inconvenience. You complain about the weather, the economy, and your luck, but you never complain about the fact that you spent the last 4 hours doing. Avoidance behavior is a psychological cancer that starts small but eventually metastasizes until every part of your life is defined by what you are afraid to confront. You have built a fortress of distractions to keep the reality of your situation at bay, but the walls are starting to crack under the pressure of the truth you are trying to ignore. Every time you avoid a challenge, you are telling your subconscious mind that you are incapable of handling the world, and this belief is slowly eroding your self-worth and your confidence. You look for support and motivation as if they were external tools, when they are actually internal fires that are fueled only by the act of doing the things you are most afraid of. Your procrastination is not a mystery. It is a direct result of your addiction to the feeling of being safe and the belief that you are entitled to a life without struggle. The world owes you nothing but an opportunity to bleed for what you want, and if you are too comfortable to take that deal, you will end up with nothing but the dust of your own excuses. You must develop a radical intolerance for your own laziness and a deep suspicion of any moment where you feel completely satisfied with your current standing. Satisfaction is the beginning of the end for any person of ambition, and the minute you stop being hungry is the minute you start becoming prey for those who are still moving. Your habits are currently designed to keep you small and predictable, and you must be willing to tear them out by the roots, even if it feels like you are tearing out your own heart in the process. The pain of the change is nothing compared to the pain of looking in the mirror 20 years from now and seeing a stranger who wasted the only life they were ever given. Your brain is a masterpiece of survival, but it is also a master of deception that will tell you whatever you need to hear to keep you from venturing out of the cave. It will tell you that you are tired when you are actually just bored, and it will tell you that you are careful when you are actually just terrified of being judged or falling short. You must learn to ignore the voice that begs for the easy way out, and instead cultivate a voice that demands the standard of the elite in every single action you take. There is a brutal beauty in the life of the person who rejects comfort and instead seeks out the mountains and the marathons and the difficult conversations that forge a true leader. That person understands that the only way to build a bridge to their dreams is through the cold water of consistent and disciplined effort, regardless of how they feel in the moment. You are currently far too concerned with your feelings and far too little concerned with your results, which is why you are still standing in the same place you were last year. Results do not care about your emotional state or your good intentions. They only respond to the raw input of your time and your energy applied toward a specific and difficult target. You must become a predator of your own weaknesses and a hunter of the obstacles that stand in your way, instead of a victim who waits for the path to be cleared by someone else. The listener who hears this must feel the sting of their own insignificance, because that sting is the only thing that will provoke a genuine response to the mediocrity they have been tolerating. You are a king in exile, and your throne is currently being occupied by your laziness, and it is time for you to walk into the palace and take back what belongs to you by right of conquest. As this chapter ends, you must realize that the bridge back to your old life of comfort has been destroyed, and the only way forward is through the fire of your own self-imposed discipline. You can no longer look at your bed or your phone or your distractions as harmless tools of relaxation, but must see them as the weapons of a silent killer that is trying to end your potential. The choice is binary, and it is immediate. You either stay in the warmth of the mediocrity you have created, or you step out into the cold wind of a life that is actually worth living. There is no middle ground, and there is no compromise, because any bit of comfort you allow yourself will eventually grow into a new cage that will hold you until you are too old to care. You must learn to love the burn of the effort and the fatigue of the long day, because those are the only indicators that you are actually moving toward the summit. The silence of the world is waiting for you to make a sound that isn't a complaint or a request for help, but a declaration of your intent to dominate your own life. No one is coming to save you from your own habits, and no one is going to pull you out of the quicksand of your comfort zone if you aren't willing to claw your way out with your own fingernails. The transition is violent and it is difficult, but it is the only way to ensure that you do not end your days as a cautionary tale of what happens when a person chooses ease over existence. Take the discomfort you feel right now and use it as a weapon to destroy the person you were this morning so that a person of substance can finally take their place. The killer is in the house, and it is your own desire for comfort, and you must be the one to end its reign before it ends yours. Your emotions are a sophisticated biological weather system that is constantly shifting and entirely unreliable when it comes to the long-term navigation of your life. You have been conditioned to believe that your feelings are a compass that points toward your truth, but in reality, they are often nothing more than the static interference of your current physical state. If you are tired or hungry or momentarily discouraged, your emotions will tell you to quit, to hide, or to seek the nearest source of cheap relief. This is the ultimate sabotage because the path to any significant achievement requires a level of consistency that your mood simply cannot sustain over a long period of time. You cannot build a cathedral on the shifting sands of how you feel on a Tuesday morning, because that foundation will crumble the moment the initial excitement of the project begins to fade. True power is not found in the height of your inspiration, but in the depth of your detachment from the whims of your nervous system. You must learn to view your emotions as a passenger in the vehicle of your life rather than the driver, because the passenger does not get to choose the destination or the speed. Discipline is the steel frame that holds your existence together when the storms of doubt and laziness attempt to blow you off course. When you allow your feelings to dictate your actions, you are essentially handing the keys of your future to a toddler who only wants what is easy and immediate. The first step toward total autonomy is the cold recognition that your emotions are a primitive survival mechanism that has not yet caught up to the demands of modern excellence. You must develop the mental sharpness to acknowledge a feeling without obeying it, and to act with a precision that remains unaffected by the internal weather of your mind. Successful individuals do not possess a secret supply of motivation that you lack. They simply have a different relationship with their discomfort and their excuses. The elite performer wakes up with the same resistance and the same voices of doubt that you do, but they have built a neural firewall that prevents those feelings from manifesting as physical inaction. They understand that action is the only valid currency in the real world, and that the universe does not provide a discount for those who are having a bad day or a difficult week. While you are waiting for the stars to align or for a surge of energy to carry you forward, they are already halfway through their list of requirements because they operate on a schedule rather than a mood. Consistency is the hallmark of the master, and consistency is impossible if you are constantly negotiating with your own laziness at 5 o'clock in the morning. You must stop treating your work as a choice that depends on your emotional availability and start treating it as an inevitable function of your identity. If you are a writer, you write, and if you are an athlete, you train, and if you are a leader, you lead regardless of whether your heart is singing or your mind is screaming for a break. This detachment is not a lack of passion, but the highest expression of it, because it protects your dreams from the frailty of your human nature. Every time you act in direct opposition to a negative emotion, you are strengthening the muscle of discipline and weakening the grip that your primitive brain has over your destiny. You are teaching yourself that you are the authority in your own life, and that your feelings are a secondary concern that can be managed rather than a primary force that must be followed. Mental control is the practice of severing the link between the thought of an excuse and the physical execution of that excuse so that the delay between the two becomes zero. You must learn to identify the specific flavor of the lies your brain tells you when it wants to avoid the friction of growth, such as the idea that you need more research or more rest. These are not insights, they are defense mechanisms designed to keep you in the safety of the known, and you must learn to treat them with the suspicion they deserve. Discipline creates a predictable environment in an unpredictable world, and it is the only thing that will keep you moving when your friends have left and the crowds have stopped cheering. The stability of a disciplined life is what allows you to take larger risks because you know that your habits will catch you if the gamble does not pay off immediately. Without this structure, you are a victim of the external environment, and your progress will always be stunted by the first obstacle that makes you feel a sense of frustration. You must become a scientist of your own behavior, tracking your results and your failures with a cold objectivity that leaves no room for the drama of self-pity. Self-pity is a luxury that you cannot afford if you intend to win, because it consumes the very energy you need to climb the mountain that is standing in your way. By detaching from the emotional narrative of your struggle, you allow yourself to see the path clearly and to move with a speed that others find intimidating and unnatural. This is the level of practical intensity required to survive the long middle of any great endeavor where the novelty has worn off and only the raw application of will remains. Your life is a series of moments where you either choose to be governed by your discipline or ruled by your distractions, and the sum of those choices is who you are. The habits of the disciplined mind are rooted in the understanding that the short-term pain of effort is infinitely preferable to the long-term agony of being a person who never followed through. You must create a set of non-negotiable standards that govern your health, your finances, and your professional output so that you are not constantly wasting energy making the same basic decisions. When a behavior becomes automatic, it requires less willpower to execute, and this frees up your cognitive resources for the complex problem solving that real success demands. Most people are exhausted not from their work, but from the endless internal debate they have with themselves about whether or not they are actually going to do the work. You must end the debate once and for all by deciding that certain actions are as mandatory as breathing and that there is no alternative path available to you. This level of rigidity may feel like a lack of freedom, but it is actually the source of it, because it liberates you from the anxiety of indecision and the guilt of procrastination. A disciplined person has more free time and more peace of mind than the hedonist, because they have conquered the internal enemy that creates chaos and clutter in the soul. You are teaching your brain to thrive on the completion of the task rather than the anticipation of the reward, and this shift in perspective is what separates the producers from the consumers. Long-term success is a marathon of boring and repetitive actions done with a high degree of excellence, and it is only possible if you have divorced your output from your temporary emotional state. You must learn to find a quiet satisfaction in the grind itself, knowing that every rep and every page is a brick in the fortress of your future empire. To detach from emotional excuses, you must first recognize that an excuse is simply a sophisticated way of saying that you are currently prioritizing your comfort over your goals. When you say you are too tired, what you are actually saying is that the temporary sensation of fatigue is more important to you than the achievement of the vision you claim to have. This honest translation of your own internal dialogue is a brutal but necessary tool for the person who is serious about breaking the cycle of mediocrity. You must develop a radical accountability that refuses to accept the role of the victim in any scenario, because the victim is the only person who cannot change their own circumstances. Even if your emotions are valid, they are still irrelevant to the requirements of the mission, and you must be willing to carry them with you while you continue to move forward. Imagine a soldier on a battlefield waiting to feel motivated before they defend their position, and you will see the absurdity of the way you have been approaching your own life. Your life is the battlefield, and the stakes are just as high because you are fighting for the survival of your potential in a world that is designed to distract you. Practical discipline means having a plan for the days when you feel like a failure and executing that plan with the same intensity as the days when you feel like a king. You are not a creature of feeling, you are a creature of action, and the more you lean into your discipline, the more you will find that your emotions actually begin to follow your lead. The feeling of confidence is not a prerequisite for action, but a result of it. And it only comes to those who have proven to themselves that they can keep a promise. Consistency is the ultimate force multiplier, and it is the only thing that can turn a modest talent into a world-class performance over the course of a few years. While others are burning out in a flash of unmanaged inspiration, you are the steady flame that continues to burn regardless of the oxygen levels in the room. You must value the integrity of your process over the speed of your results, because the process is the only thing you truly control and the only thing that builds character. If you can maintain your discipline during the seasons of your life, when everything is going wrong, you will be unstoppable when the wind is finally at your back. Most people quit when the emotional returns on their effort diminish, but that is precisely the moment when the real growth begins, because it is the moment when you are no longer doing it for the praise. You are doing it because it is who you are, and because you have reached a level of mental control where the external world no longer has the power to slow you down. This strength is a quiet and unassuming power that does not need to shout to be felt by everyone who comes into contact with your work. It is the power of the person who knows that they will be there tomorrow and the day after that and the year after that until the objective is finally secured. You are building a reputation with yourself that you are someone who cannot be broken by a bad mood or a setback, and that internal trust is the foundation of all true confidence. Learn to love the silence of the work that no one sees, because that is where the person you will become is currently being forged in the heat of your own persistent will. Teaching yourself to act regardless of your mood requires you to build a system of physical triggers and environmental cues that signal to your brain that it is time to perform. You do not wait for the spirit to move you, you move the body, and the spirit has no choice but to follow along for the ride. This is the practical side of discipline, where you understand the mechanics of your own psychology and you use them to your advantage instead of being a victim of them. You set your clothes out, you clear your desk, and you start the timer because you know that the first 10 minutes of any task are the hardest, and that once you are in motion, the friction will decrease. You must become a master of the start and an expert in the art of showing up, because showing up is 80% of the battle against your own emotional resistance. Once you are in the arena, you will find that the fear and the lethargy that seemed so large 10 minutes ago have begun to shrink in the face of your actual engagement. This is the secret of the high achiever. They do not have a higher tolerance for pain. They simply have a lower tolerance for the mental drama that precedes the work. They cut through the noise and get to the signal, and they do it with a ruthless efficiency that leaves no room for the indulgence of a mid-afternoon slump. You are currently wasting a massive amount of energy fighting with yourself, and you must decide today to end that civil war and focus all of your power on the external world. When you are no longer at war with your own feelings, you will find that you have a level of energy and clarity that you never thought possible. As this chapter draws to a close, you should feel a sense of cold and calculated resolve settling over your mind like a layer of frost on a steel blade. You are no longer a slave to the fickle winds of your emotions, and you are no longer looking for a feeling of inspiration to justify your existence. You are a person of discipline, and you are defined by the consistency of your actions and the strength of your standards rather than the intensity of your moods. The excuses that used to hold you back have been revealed as the shallow illusions they are, and you are now equipped with the practical tools to dismantle them whenever they appear. You are building a life of stability and long-term success that is independent of the chaos of the world because your foundation is located within your own unshakable will. The path ahead will still contain moments of fear and moments of doubt, but they will no longer have the power to stop your progress because you have detached from their influence. You are moving with the weight and the inevitability of a glacier, and anything that stands in your way will eventually be ground into dust by the pressure of your persistence. Take this mental control into the next hour of your life and prove to yourself that you are the master of your own house by doing exactly what you said you would do. No one is coming to save you, and no one is going to give you a medal for having a strong character, but the results of your discipline will be your ultimate reward. You are finally ready to do the work because you have stopped asking yourself how you feel about it and started asking yourself if it is necessary for the person you are becoming. The universe operates on a fundamental law of entropy that dictates that nothing in existence remains truly static or neutral even for a single passing second. You have been living under the comforting but deadly illusion that you can simply pause your life and maintain your current level of fitness, wealth, or character while you wait for a more convenient time to exert effort. This is a mathematical impossibility because life is a moving river, and to stop paddling is not to remain in place, but to be carried backward by the relentless current of time. Every single choice you make and every thought you entertain is either a brick being laid for the fortress of your future or a hammer blow against the foundation of what you have already built. There is no middle ground, and there is no sanctuary of stasis where you can hide from the consequences of your own passivity or your own progress. You are either growing or you are dying, and the moment you decide that you have done enough is the exact moment that the process of your decay begins its silent work. This reality is a cold and objective force that does not care about your intentions or your past achievements because it only recognizes the direction of your current momentum. If you are not actively climbing the mountain, then gravity is pulling you down toward the valley of insignificance and regret with every breath you take. You must awaken to the fact that your neutrality is actually a form of slow-motion suicide where you are trading your potential for the temporary safety of the shore. The direction of your life is being determined right now in the quiet spaces between your breaths. And if you are not consciously building, then you are unknowingly dismantling the only life you will ever have. Consider the microscopic habits that govern your daily existence and how they act as the invisible architects of a destiny that you will eventually be forced to occupy. When you choose to skip a workout or eat a meal that you know serves your cravings rather than your fuel requirements, you are not just making an isolated mistake, you are practicing the art of decline. These small moments of surrender are seeds planted in a garden of mediocrity, and they will eventually grow into a forest of limitations that will block the sun from your future. On the other hand, every difficult task you complete and every temptation you resist is a small deposit into a high-interest account of self-mastery that will pay dividends in ways you cannot yet imagine. The concept of compounding interest applies to your character just as much as it applies to your finances, and the trajectory of your growth is determined by the consistency of your inputs. You do not wake up one day and find yourself a failure, just as you do not wake up one day and find yourself a champion, because both states are the result of thousands of tiny, invisible decisions made in the dark. The terrifying truth is that you are currently heading in a specific direction at a specific speed, and your daily habits are the only evidence that matters when predicting where you will land. If you look at your last 72 hours with a cold and clinical eye, you will see the blueprint of your future self, and you will realize that you are either reinforcing your strength or feeding your weakness. There are no neutral actions in this game, and even the decision to do nothing is an active contribution to the erosion of your will and the eventual collapse of your long-term ambitions. The invisible direction of your life is often hidden from view because the decay of a human life is usually a silent and painless process that happens in the background of your distractions. You do not notice the loss of your edge or the slowing of your mind because it happens in increments so small that they are almost impossible to measure on a daily basis. However, if you were to compare yourself to the person you were 5 years ago, you would see the unmistakable evidence of either a massive expansion of your capacity or a steady contraction into a smaller version of yourself. Most people are shrinking because they have traded the struggle of growth for the comfort of the status quo, and they are unaware that the status quo is a sinking ship in an ocean of change. To build is to engage in a constant war against the natural inclination toward ease, and to recognize that the friction of the climb is the only thing that keeps you from sliding into the abyss. You must develop a radical sensitivity to the feeling of stagnation and learn to treat it as an emergency that requires immediate and massive corrective action. The people who reach the summit are not fundamentally different from you. They simply realized earlier that every day is a ledger where you are either in the black of growth or the red of decline. They stopped believing in the myth of the plateau and accepted that the only way to stay on the heights is to keep climbing until their heart stops beating in their chest. Your life is a masterpiece in progress or a ruin in the making, and the brush is currently in your hand, even if you are too afraid to make a mark on the canvas. The silence of the room is not empty, it is filled with the sound of your potential either being forged into a blade or being eaten away by the rust of your own procrastination. Massive outcomes are nothing more than the final visible manifestation of a long and tedious chain of small actions that were once considered insignificant by the casual observer. When you see a person of great influence or great wealth or great physical power, you are looking at the end result of a building process that was often boring and repetitive and completely devoid of glamour. They chose to build when they were tired, and they chose to build when they were bored, and they chose to build when the rest of the world was sleeping or seeking pleasure in the shadows. Conversely, the person who finds themselves in a state of ruin at 50 years old is simply viewing the final result of 1,000 nights where they chose the easy path over the right one. The slow drip of water can eventually carve a canyon through solid rock, and your daily habits are either carving a path to greatness or eroding the very ground you stand on. You must learn to value the process more than the prize, because the process is the only thing that is real and the only thing that you can control in a chaotic world. If you focus on the building, the decay will take care of itself, and you will find that the momentum of your growth becomes a shield that protects you from the distractions of the masses. The direction you are moving is currently being fueled by the energy you are putting into your current tasks, and if that energy is low, then your trajectory is inevitably pointing toward the earth. There is a deep and serious philosophical weight to the realization that you are the architect of your own decline, and that no one is coming to stop you from destroying yourself with your own hands. You must take the hammer and the nails and start the work of construction today, because the sun is already starting to set on the time you have been given to make something of yourself. True growth requires a level of intensity and focus that is uncomfortable for the average person, because it demands the total sacrifice of who you are for the sake of who you could become. This transformation is not a single event, but a continuous series of deaths and rebirths where you must be willing to burn your old self to provide the light for your new path. If you are not feeling the heat of that fire, then you are simply rotting in the cold, and you are confusing your lack of pain for a state of well-being when it is actually a state of numbness. Decay is the default setting of the universe, and it takes a constant infusion of will and energy to resist the pull of the grave and to stay in the light of your own potential. You are currently in a state of flux, and the atoms of your life are constantly rearranging themselves based on the signals you are sending them through your actions and your thoughts. If you send signals of weakness and hesitation, then your life will reflect that chaos. But if you send signals of power and discipline, then your life will take on the structure of a cathedral. The invisible direction of your life is the sum total of these signals, and it is heading toward a destination that you have already chosen, even if you haven't admitted it to yourself yet. You must be brave enough to look at your destination and ask yourself if it is a place you actually want to live, because by the time you arrive, it will be too late to change the reservation. Building is an act of defiance against the void, and it is the only way to prove that you were actually here and that your presence on this earth meant something to the fabric of history. Do not settle for the decay of the common man who waits for a luck that never comes while his life leaks out through the holes in his character and his habits. The habits of building are often the very things you find most repulsive in your current state of comfort, because they require the direct confrontation of your limitations and your fears. You avoid the heavy lifting and the difficult study and the long hours of focus because they are an assault on your sense of self, but they are the only things that can expand that self. When you build, you are essentially engaging in a form of self-engineering where you are replacing your old and weak components with new and resilient ones that can handle the pressure of a larger life. This process is often painful, and it is always demanding, but it is the only way to ensure that you are not crushed by the weight of your own existence as you get older. Decay is what happens when you decide that you are finished and that you have earned the right to relax and watch the world go by from the sidelines of the arena. The sidelines are a graveyard of wasted talent, and you must stay on the field and keep moving even when your limbs are heavy and your eyes are blurred by the sweat of your own effort. Every small act of discipline is a vote for the version of you that survives the winter, and every small act of indulgence is a vote for the version of you that perishes in the cold. The invisible direction of your life is the result of these votes, and the election is happening every single minute of every single day, with no breaks and no holidays. You cannot afford to be a passive observer of your own campaign, because the opposition is the entropy of the universe, and it never stops working to pull you back into the dust. Take command of your construction and realize that you are the only one who can ensure that your life is a monument to what is possible rather than a cautionary tale of what happens when a man gives up. Philosophically, you must understand that your existence is a loan of time and energy that must be repaid with a life of substance and meaning, or it will be reclaimed by the void with interest. You do not own your life, you are merely the steward of it. And if you are a poor steward who allows the property to decay, then you are failing in your primary duty to the universe. To build is to honor the gift of consciousness, and to prove that you are worthy of the air you breathe by creating something that stands against the erosion of time. This perspective shifts the focus from your own temporary pleasure to the long-term health of your legacy and the impact you have on the world around you. You are part of a larger architecture of human effort, and if you are not contributing to the structure, then you are merely a weight that the rest of us have to carry on our backs. The intensity of this thought should provoke a sense of urgency that overrides your desire for distraction and pushes you into the realm of radical action and extreme ownership. You are currently heading toward the final chapter of your story, and you must decide if the reader will find a tale of a builder who left a legacy or a drifter who left a ruin. Every day that you do not build is a day that you have actively chosen to decay, and there is no way to reconcile that fact with a desire for a meaningful and successful life. The choices are before you, and they are as clear as the sun in the sky. You either pick up the tools and start the work, or you sit in the dirt and wait for the end to arrive. Your life is a serious business, and it is time you treated it with the respect and the discipline that a project of this magnitude deserves and demands from you. As the final paragraphs of this chapter resonate in your mind, let the realization sink in that your neutrality was the most dangerous lie you have ever told yourself to keep the fear of failure at bay. You are standing on a moving platform, and if you are not moving toward the light of your ambition, then you are receding into the darkness of your own forgotten potential at an alarming rate of speed. The invisible direction of your life has been revealed, and you now have the awareness to see the path you have been walking and the courage to change it if you do not like the view. Building is not a hobby or a part-time endeavor. It is the only valid response to the reality of your existence, and it must become your primary obsession if you wish to survive. Take the discomfort you feel right now and use it as the first stone in the new foundation of a life that is built on the bedrock of action and the steel of unyielding discipline. The decay stops the moment you decide to move, and the construction begins the moment you pick up the weight of your responsibility and refuse to put it down until the job is finished. You are the builder, and you are the building, and the quality of the materials you use today will determine the strength of the shelter you have tomorrow when the storms finally arrive. No one is coming to save you from the entropy of your own life, and no one is going to build your dreams for you while you sleep in the warmth of your own excuses. The world is waiting for your contribution, and the clock is ticking with a cold and steady rhythm that reminds you that your time is a finite resource that is being spent even as you listen. Build with a ferocity that leaves no room for doubt, and decay will have no place to take root in the garden of your life as you move toward the person you were always meant to become. To become the person you are destined to be, you must first become a lethal threat to the person you currently are, because the old version of you is the primary obstacle standing in your way. You are engaged in a silent civil war between your history and your potential, and if you do not actively hunt down and destroy your old habits, they will surely consume your future. Identity transformation is not a gentle process of adding new skills to your existing frame, but a violent act of rebirth that requires the total dismantling of your current ego. You must develop a radical intolerance for your own mediocrity and a suspicion of the comfort that has kept you stagnant for so long. The version of you that seeks permission, that fears judgment, and that waits for motivation is a parasite that has lived off your potential for far too long. To evolve, you must be willing to outgrow your old self so completely that your past becomes a foreign country you no longer recognize when you look back at the map. This is the moment where you decide to stop being a victim of your conditioning and start being the architect of your own evolution with a focus that is sharp enough to cut through your own excuses. You are moving from a state of passive existence into a state of aggressive self-engineering where every thought is vetted and every action is calculated to serve the mission. The old you is comfortable in the dark, but the new you is a creature of the light who understands that the only way to survive the coming years is to be stronger than the version of you that failed last year. This is a total war for the territory of your soul, and you must be prepared to be the hero who slays the dragon of your own inertia to claim the crown. The environment you have cultivated is the physical manifestation of your old identity, and it is currently acting as a gravitational pull that keeps you tethered to the ground you have already trodden. If you wish to become someone new, you must look at your surroundings, your social circle, and your daily routines with a cold and objective eye that prioritizes growth over sentimentality. You cannot expect to reach a new destination while driving the same car on the same road with the same passengers who are content with staying exactly where they are. Becoming dangerous to your old self means identifying the people and the places that reinforce your weaknesses and having the courage to leave them behind without an explanation or a second glance. This is the discomfort of evolution, where the shedding of your old skin leaves you feeling exposed and vulnerable until the new armor of your character begins to harden. You are not losing your friends, you are outgrowing the frequency of their stagnation, and you are not losing your comfort, you are gaining the freedom of the open road. The habits that once felt like a safety net are now revealed to be the bars of a cage, and you must be willing to break them one by one to see what lies beyond the perimeter of your current life. Your environment is either a greenhouse for your potential or a graveyard for your ambition, and if the air feels stale, it is because you have stayed in the same room for too long. Transformation requires a change of scenery and a change of standards that makes the old version of you feel like a ghost that no longer has a seat at the table. You are clearing the land so that a new and more powerful structure can be built on the bedrock of your unyielding will and your commitment to excellence. A stronger mindset is not something you find, but something you forge in the heat of the very challenges you once spent your entire life trying to avoid or ignore. You must become a predator of your own weaknesses, hunting down the cracks in your discipline and filling them with the molten steel of consistent and uncompromising effort. This reinvention is a process of cutting away the fat of your hesitation and the rot of your self-doubt until only the lean and functional parts of your character remain. You are learning to think with a precision that leaves no room for the noise of the masses or the static of your own emotional fluctuations that used to dictate your day. The new identity you are building is one that views obstacles as fuel and resistance as the primary indicator that you are moving in the right direction toward your ultimate goal. You are training your mind to find the path of most resistance because you know that is where the greatest growth is hidden from the eyes of the lazy and the entitled. To become dangerous to your old self, you must adopt a philosophy of total ownership where you refuse to accept any excuse for failure regardless of the external circumstances. This mindset is a shield that protects you from the toxicity of a world that wants you to remain small and manageable and predictable so that it can continue to use you. You are becoming a force that cannot be bargained with, and an individual who cannot be distracted because your eyes are fixed on a horizon that only you can see. The power of this reinvention is that it makes you immune to the weapons of your past and gives you the strength to stand alone in the storm while others are running for cover. The discomfort of change is the price of admission to a life of substance, and it is a tax that you must pay every single day if you wish to maintain your status as a person of evolution. Most people flee from this discomfort because they mistake the pain of growth for the pain of injury, but you must learn to welcome it as a signal of your own increasing capacity. You are feeling the friction of your old self being dragged into the future, and while it hurts to let go of the familiarity, it is the only way to escape the gravity of your history. Reinvention is a lonely business because the version of you that people liked was the version that stayed in line and didn't make them feel insecure about their own lack of progress. As you become more dangerous to your old self, you will find that you are also becoming more dangerous to the status quo, and this will bring a new level of pressure into your life. You must embrace this pressure and use it to crystallize your resolve until you are as hard as a diamond and as sharp as a razor in your pursuit of the life you deserve. The power of reinvention lies in the fact that you can choose your own traits and you can design your own reactions rather than being a collection of trauma and social programming. You are the sculptor and the stone and the hammer, and every strike you make is an act of liberation from the person you were told you had to be by a world that didn't know you. Do not be afraid of the silence that follows the departure of your old self, because in that silence you will finally hear the voice of the person you were always meant to become. This is the birth of a new reality where your potential is no longer a dream, but a daily requirement that you meet with the ferocity of a warrior. Building a stronger mindset requires you to become a student of your own failures and to treat every setback as a diagnostic report that tells you where your old self is still hiding. You must be willing to look at the parts of your character that are cowardly or lazy or dishonest and cut them off with the precision of a surgeon who is removing a tumor. This is not about self-hatred, but about a deep and profound love for the person you have the potential to be and a refusal to let the past hold that person hostage. You are creating a set of internal laws that are more binding than the laws of the land, and you are enforcing them with a discipline that makes your old self tremble in fear. When the old voice whispers that you should sleep in or that you have done enough, you must respond with an intensity that leaves no room for debate or negotiation. You are becoming a person who does not need an external master because you have become your own most demanding and most relentless commander in the field. This level of self-mastery is the only true form of freedom because it means that you are no longer a slave to your impulses or the fleeting opinions of a society that is falling apart. You are becoming a pillar of strength in a world of sand, and your value is increasing every time you choose the difficult right over the easy wrong in the privacy of your own life. The new identity you are forging is one that is built on the foundation of earned confidence rather than the fragile scaffolding of empty affirmations and false hope. You are doing the work and you are paying the price, and the results will be the only proof you need to show the world that the old version of you is dead and gone forever. The evolution of your habits is the front line of this battle because your habits are the physical evidence of who you believe you are and what you believe you are worth to the universe. You must audit your time with the same intensity that a billionaire audits their bank account, and you must ruthlessly eliminate the leakages of energy that serve your old self. If your old identity was a consumer of cheap entertainment, then your new identity must be a producer of high-value results and a seeker of difficult and transformative knowledge. You are replacing the easy dopamine of the screen with the hard-earned satisfaction of the struggle, and you are finding that the latter is far more addictive and far more rewarding. This shift in your chemical reward system is the most dangerous thing you can do to your old self because it removes the leverage that comfort once had over your soul. You are becoming a person who thrives in the arena and who seeks out the heavy weight and the long mile because you know that is where the old version of you will eventually succumb and disappear. The new habits you are forming are the structural supports of your new life, and they must be built with a density that can withstand the greatest pressures and the darkest nights of the soul. You are not just changing what you do, you are changing why you do it, and this shift in purpose is what provides the fire that keeps you moving when everyone else has cooled into ash. Every time you repeat a disciplined action, you are burying the old you a little deeper and giving the new you a little more room to breathe and to grow into the giant you were meant to be. To truly outgrow your past, you must be willing to forgive yourself for the time you wasted and the mistakes you made, while simultaneously refusing to allow those things to define your current standing. Your history is a school, not a prison, and you have already learned the lessons required to move into the higher grades of your existence if you are brave enough to enroll. Becoming dangerous to your old self means that you no longer use your past as an excuse for your present, and you no longer look to your biography to tell you what is possible for your future. You are a new creation in a new world, and the only thing that connects you to the person you were yesterday is the memory that you are choosing to leave behind. This sense of detachment is a superpower because it means that you can pivot and adapt and evolve with a speed that others cannot match because they are still carrying the weight of their old selves. You are traveling light, and you are traveling fast, and you are moving toward a version of excellence that was previously invisible to your old eyes. The intensity of this transformation will be reflected in the way you walk and the way you talk and the way you look at the world because you are no longer a participant in the common struggle. You have stepped out of the herd, and you have become a predator of your own destiny, hunting down the opportunities that others are too afraid to even acknowledge as possibilities. The power of reinvention is your birthright, and you are finally claiming it with the boldness and the authority of a person who has decided that they will not die without knowing the full extent of their own power. As you step into the light of this new identity, you must realize that there is no returning to the person you were, because you have burned the map and broken the compass that led you to the valley of mediocrity. You are standing at the top of a peak that your old self was too terrified to even look at, and you are breathing an air that is too thin and too pure for the weak and the stagnant to survive. This is the end of the chapter of your life where you were a passenger and the beginning of the chapter where you are the storm that changes the entire landscape. You are empowered, intense, and bold, and you are carrying the fire of 1,000 suns in your heart as you move forward into the unknown territory of your own greatness. The transformation is complete when you can look at the old version of you and feel a sense of distant pity for the person who didn't know that they were carrying a kingdom inside them the whole time. You are dangerous to your old self, and you are a threat to the limitations of the world because you have finally realized that no one is coming to save you because you have already saved yourself. The journey continues with a new strength and a new purpose, and you are ready for the challenges that lie ahead because you have already conquered the greatest enemy of all, which was your own hesitation. Walk forward with the knowledge that you are a new person and that the world must now adjust its expectations to match the new standard you have set for your existence. This is the moment of your total liberation and the beginning of a legacy that will be written in the stone of your actions and the steel of your unyielding resolve. The journey has reached its final destination, and you are now standing at the edge of the most important threshold you will ever encounter in your brief and finite life. We have stripped away the comfort of the rescue fantasy, and we have exposed the brutal indifference of a world that is not watching your struggle and is not coming to solve your problems. You have seen how your childhood conditioning and your social programming created a dependency that turned you into a passenger in your own vehicle while time was stealing your potential. The illusion of a safety net has been burned away, and you are left with the cold and terrifying clarity that your existence is entirely in your own hands. This is the moment of peak psychological disruption where the path behind you has crumbled into the abyss, and the only way to avoid the fall is to step forward into the weight of your own power. You can no longer pretend that you didn't know the truth or that you were waiting for a sign, because this entire experience has been the alarm clock you have been trying to sleep through for a decade. The silence that follows these words is the sound of your own agency returning to you, and it is the most heavy and precious burden you will ever carry from this day forward. You must accept that every failure and every victory you have ever experienced was the result of the decisions you made or the actions you refused to take in the quiet moments of your life. There is no one to blame, and there is no one to thank but the person who is listening to this voice, and the realization of that fact is the beginning of your true liberation. You are standing at the finish line of the old you, and the starting line of the person you were always meant to become if you have the nerve to move. The consequences of inaction are not merely a stagnation of your current state, but a rapid and painful acceleration toward a life of permanent and unfixable regret. If you choose to walk away from this moment and return to the lukewarm comfort of your old habits, you are effectively choosing to die while your heart is still beating in your chest. Inaction is a slow poison that dulls your senses and erodes your spirit until you are nothing more than a hollow shell of what could have been and what should have been. You will watch the years pass by with a growing sense of dread as you realize that the opportunities you once had are being handed to those who were brave enough to seize them while you were waiting. The ghost of your unfulfilled potential will haunt every room you enter and every conversation you have, acting as a constant reminder of the cowardice that kept you in the dark. You are currently deciding whether you will be a cautionary tale for the next generation or a beacon of light for those who are still trapped in the same cage you just escaped. Every day you spend in a state of hesitation is a day you are actively destroying the legacy you claim to want, and the version of you that survives will be a bitter stranger to the person you are today. The pain of the change is temporary and it leads to the summit of your greatness, but the pain of staying the same is eternal and it leads to the graveyard of the forgotten. You must choose your pain right now because there is no path that is free of suffering, and the only question that matters is whether that suffering will be for a purpose or for nothing. The clock is a predator that is currently devouring your options, and it does not negotiate with those who are too afraid to make a decision. The rewards of change are found in the radical autonomy and the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing you are the master of your own house and the pilot of your own fate. When you take total responsibility for your life, you stop being a victim of the external environment, and you start being a force of nature that can bend reality to match your internal vision. You will find that the fear that once paralyzed you has been replaced by a quiet and steady resolve that makes you immune to the distractions and the judgments of the common man. The strength you have forged in the fire of your own self-imposed discipline will become a shield that protects you from the storms of life and a weapon that cuts through any obstacle in your path. You will wake up with a sense of purpose that is so intense it feels like a physical vibration in your soul, because you are finally in alignment with the truth of your own potential. The freedom to build your own kingdom And to write your own rules is the ultimate prize for the person who is brave enough to reject the safety of the herd and stand alone in the light. This is not about the money or the status or the applause, but about the raw and visceral satisfaction of looking in the mirror and knowing that you did not wait for permission to exist. You have earned your seat at the table of the elite through the relentless application of your will and the refusal to accept anything less than your absolute best in every single endeavor. The life you have been dreaming about is not a gift that is granted by the universe, but a territory that is conquered by the person who has decided that they are finally done with being small. This is the moment where the struggle turns into success, and where the effort turns into an empire that will stand long after the excuses of others have turned to dust. Take control immediately, because the window of opportunity is closing with every second that passes, and the person you are right now is the only one who can make the shift. You do not need another book or another seminar or another conversation to start the work, because the only thing you have ever needed was the decision to stop lying to yourself. Start with the habit you have been avoiding and have the difficult conversation you have been fearing, and move toward the mountain that you have been watching from a safe distance for far too long. The momentum of your life is currently working against you, and it will take a massive and immediate infusion of energy to reverse the direction and start the climb toward the summit. Do not wait for the morning or the next Monday or the start of the new year, because those are the lies of the old you who is trying to drag you back into the comfort of the grave. The transformation happens in the now, or it does not happen at all, and every moment you spend thinking about it is a moment you are wasting on a fantasy of future effort. You must become a person of action who values results over intentions, and who understands that the only valid response to a challenge is to overcome it with a ferocity that leaves no room for doubt. The world will not pause for your preparation, and the competition will not wait for your readiness, because the game is already in progress, and you are currently losing by default. The power to change everything is located in the next choice you make and the next movement you initiate, so do not waste it on another minute of passive reflection or quiet desperation. You are the architect and the builder and the occupant of your own destiny, and the time to break ground on the new foundation of your life is in this very breath. The summary of this journey is that you have been given the tools to dismantle your old self and the map to navigate the territory of your new identity, but the actual walking must be done by you. We have discussed the lie of the rescue, the reality of the invisible observer, and the day that responsibility becomes your primary fuel for existence. We have exposed the silent killer of comfort and the absolute necessity of discipline over emotion, as well as the law that you are either building or you are decaying. You have learned that to become someone new, you must first become dangerous to the person you were, and you must be willing to outgrow your past version completely and without apology. This is the integration of the lessons and the final hardening of the resolve that will carry you through the long and difficult years of the work that lies ahead in the arena. You are no longer the person who started this chapter, and you are no longer the victim who was waiting for a savior to appear from the clouds to solve the problems you created. You have transitioned from a consumer of motivation to a producer of power, and the results of this shift will be evident in the way you hold yourself and the way you interact with the world. The journey was not about finding a secret, but about revealing the strength that was always hidden beneath the layers of your fear and your hesitation and your social conditioning. You are now fully aware of the stakes, and you are fully equipped for the struggle, and you are finally ready to be the hero of your own story instead of a background character in someone else's. The integration of these truths is the final step in the preparation phase, and you are now entering the execution phase, where only your actions will be used to judge your value. The emotional intensity of this conclusion is the fire that should be burning in your chest as you realize that the time for talking and the time for thinking is officially over forever. You should feel a sense of urgency that borders on panic because you now know exactly how much you have lost to the shadows of your own indecision and your own comfort. This pain is your friend because it is the only thing that will keep you from returning to the sleep of the common man who lives his life in a state of quiet and permanent mediocrity. Let the anger at your old self fuel your first steps, and let the love for your potential drive your long-term persistence until you reach the goal you have set for yourself. You are at an emotional breaking point where the reality of your situation is colliding with the possibility of your future, and the result should be a blinding flash of clarity. The emotional intensity of this conclusion is the fire that should be burning in your chest as you realize that the time for talking and the time for thinking is officially over forever. You should feel a sense of urgency that borders on panic because you now know exactly how much you have lost to the shadows of your own indecision and your own comfort. This pain is your friend because it is the only thing that will keep you from returning to the sleep of the common man who lives his life in a state of quiet and permanent mediocrity. Let the anger at your old self fuel your first steps, and let the love for your potential drive your long-term persistence until you reach the goal you have set for yourself. You are at an emotional breaking point. As we reach the final moments of this script, you must understand that the voice will soon fade, but the responsibility will remain with you every single day until you draw your last breath. You are now the captain of the ship, and the weather is of no consequence because you have the discipline and the character to navigate any sea that the universe places in your path. The journey of becoming a self-reliant and powerful individual is a marathon that never truly ends because there is always a higher peak to climb and a deeper level of mastery to achieve. You have committed to the path of the builder, and you must never look back at the ruins of your old life with anything other than the distant memory of a lesson well learned and a prisoner escaped. The world is yours to take if you have the stomach for the fight and the heart for the long haul, and the mind for the cold and calculated pursuit of excellence. You have been given the truth, and the truth has made you dangerous to the status quo and a threat to the limitations that once held you back from the fruit of your labor. Carry this intensity into every interaction and every decision, and never let the fire of your ambition be dimmed by the lukewarm opinions of those who are still waiting for a rescue. You are the savior you have been looking for, and you are the hero you have been waiting to meet, and you are finally standing in the full light of your own absolute and unyielding power. The transformation is not a single event, but a permanent state of evolution, and you are now the primary driver of that process for the rest of your existence on this earth. Walk into your new life with the boldness of a conqueror and the focus of a saint because you have finally decided that you are the only one who can save you. Now listen closely to the final words that will stay in your mind as a permanent anchor for your spirit and a constant reminder of the decision you have made in this moment of truth. You are standing in the rubble of your excuses, and you are looking at the horizon of your potential, and the only thing that can stop you now is your own return to the comfort of the lie. Remember that the pain of discipline is a small price to pay for the freedom of the soul, and that the weight of responsibility is the only thing that keeps a man grounded in a world of ghosts. No one is coming to save you because you do not need saving. You need the courage to be the person you already know you are when the lights are off and the world is quiet. The life you want is on the other side of the work you are avoiding, and the person you want to be is on the other side of the fears you are coddling like a precious secret. Take the control and never give it back to anyone or anything regardless of the cost or the consequence, because your autonomy is the only thing that is truly yours. The bridge is burned and the path is clear, and the sun is rising on a life that is finally and completely your own creation and your own victory. From this second forward, your destiny is written in the steel of your actions and the stone of your resolve, and the voice of your own unshakable will is the only command you will ever obey. Go and build the life that proves that you are worthy of the opportunity of existence, and do not stop until the world knows your name not as a victim, but as a master. The silence is yours, the power is yours, and the time is now, because the rescue mission is over, and the Savior has finally arrived, and the Savior is you. Save yourself or stay stuck forever, and the choice you make in this very second is the only one that will ever truly matter.